Let me introduce myself. My name is Lise. I am 21 years old and I live in France. I experienced a lot of paranormal things that shook my childhood adolescence, which always raised questions for me. I will tell you my story in detail. Before you start, you should know that I have a theory that I will say at the end of my story, and sorry for the spelling. I was then 5 years old, 6 years old, I would say. At that time, I lived in a two-story house with my parents who slept on the first floor and my sister on the top floor. I was on the first floor with my parents. One evening, while I was falling asleep peacefully without light, I suddenly woke up and felt a monstrously great fear. I was very hot. I was sweating enormously. While there was no sound, none of that, I put myself so my blanket over my face, leaving just my nose sticking out. I felt like I was being watched at the edge of my bed, as if someone or something was watching me. The evenings passed, and every night I felt the same thing. It lasted about a few minutes before going back to sleep after my big scare. One evening I took my courage during yet another fear to look at the ground to see if there was something, and that I was not dreaming. There was something. Someone was good there. What I saw: large, slightly round shoes facing my bed, men's shoes. In any case, I felt they were a man. After seeing these shoes the following nights, I heard the man come to my bed walking. I felt him look at me, then slowly leave. When he left again, I fell asleep immediately. I then asked my parents if they came to see me at night. They told me no. My mother is a strong believer in the paranormal. Unlike my father, who is very philosophical, she experienced things herself. So I talked to her about it a few years later before moving. She advised me to talk to this man, which I couldn't do because of the thrill of fear it caused me. After discussing this with an adult, I found myself upside down in my bed, wrapped in my duvet. I was screaming for my mother to come and save me because I didn't know where I was. My mother never was also afraid. We then moved to a small house with my father and my mother, my room being near my parents as usual. This reassured me so much. I was now 12 years old. I then fell asleep the first night in my new room. Everything went well, but I always slept with my light on and my duvet on my face, leaving my nose protruding in summer. As in winter, one evening I heard someone say my name slowly, like a whisper. Lies. Then I immediately hid under my blanket because I was playing my DS in secret. I thought it was my father at first. Then I heard even louder read. I was sweating like every other year. Nothing happened after a few years, but I was still so stressed at night. Time passed, and the more things I felt in this house. When I was alone, I felt observed. As soon as I turned my head, I saw black shadows suddenly disappear. I had a staircase that went up to the small floor of the house. I almost never went up there because I felt something at the top of it. But I was going up there to play video games. So I played video games at night because I was so afraid of falling asleep. But I had to sleep one day, so I fell asleep on the bed that was upstairs with the television on to reassure me. I was around 15 years old. Then I felt the same sensation again and someone calling me very loudly, "Read Shuat." So I woke up. I hadn't slept all night because of fear. I then slept all day. Sometimes I saw things like a very bright light on the wall in front of my bed that I had taken a photo of for my mother when my parents went on vacation. I no longer have this photo. Unfortunately, I approached the light because over time I finally got used to it. The light remained then. I touched it. It was warm and reassuring. So when I was alone, I would talk to these things. "Where are you? Are you okay today?" Sometimes at night I felt someone caressing my back. It was quite disturbing, but in truth I felt very good. When I was playing with my figures a few times, they would jump from my bed onto the floor in front of my eyes. Also, I had found a branch that strangely resembled a tree of life, which I put in the trash under the advice of a lady who had come to my house who smelled the spirits. Read the cards, you see what. My mom wanted to know more about why I felt all this. This lady then revealed that the spirit of a lady lived in this house, the former owner. But she never talked about a man. When she came into my room, she had a wave of fear. I often left my shutters closed because I was too lazy to open them. She told me that evil spirits were stored in my room, which sent a chill down my spine. Now I live in an apartment with my partner. I'm 21 years old. And I wasn't finished. I hear a voice from time to time which gives me short sentences. I was getting out of the shower when I heard, "Are you okay, darling?" I then jumped up and shouted to my partner, who was downstairs, if he had called me. "No, I didn't call you at all. I'm peeling the zucchini for this evening." The last time I heard a voice was when I was on the sofa in my living room listening to a felled-up video. Good atmosphere. I then heard, "Shut up." I then turn off my phone in the middle of the day and I end up shouting, "Leave me alone." Since that day, nothing more. I sometimes feel strange things also. I see black masses. I even bought books on the paranormal. I also started doing cartomancy. I draw cards for my loved ones, which troubles them because I discover things about them. So who was this man all this time? My grandfather died when I was 5. I assumed it was him. My mother confided that it was him from the beginning. My darling is not a trivial nickname. Me and my mother have moved around a lot. When I was 8, my father was a drunk and didn't contribute to much from what I remember and was never home, so Mom and me decided to move on from him. They never married, so there were no strings attached. We left when I was around 7, so we shuffled from place to place for a few years till finally Mom landed a good job and was able to afford a small apartment. It was a small place, but still not so bad. We made it a home after having to paint the walls and a few other small minor adjustments approved by the landlord, which have us a reduced rent, so things were going good for us. We met a few of the neighbors in the same building who were mainly made up of old people, but very nice people, always helpful and kind. Sometimes they'd invite us for dinner, which was nice since at times we never really had anything to eat, so it was a nice gesture. I was adjusting to having my own room at that age, and I had all my toys and such piled and stacked in the corner in my bed right by a wide open window. Mom didn't trust me enough to have this big window and was always afraid I'd fall right out, but even I knew I wasn't stupid enough to fall 3 stories down from playing. The first few nights were rough cause I felt uneasy for some reason. I always felt like someone was watching me, and because of the hot summer nights I'd have my window open to let some air in. Laying by that window was eerie for whatever reason, but I always did my best to ignore it. I figured I was just adjusting, as Mom would always say. By the first week of having my own room and space, I kept seeing my things in places I'd never leave them. Some toys knocked over and a few picture frames dropped from my wall. I never mentioned it Mom cause I didn't want to give her a reason get me out of the room, so I never spoke about it. One night, as I was tossing and turning from the hot summer wind blowing in from outside, I turned to my right and I felt something brush up against my face. I kept swatting away thinking it was a bug, but when I opened my eyes, all I could see is a pair of feet with a long flowing white dress. I gasped out of fear and I closed my eyes in a panic. When I removed my hands, what I had seen was gone. I kept trying to convince myself that I was dreaming, but I knew what I had seen and Mom for sure wouldn't have believed me. That next night I slept on the floor in the hopes that I wouldn't see what I seen that previous night. As I was reading a comic book with a flashlight under my blanket, I felt a strong gust of wind blowing in from the outside, which blew my blanket off my head. As I crawled chasing my thin blanket on the floor, I could see a shadow on the floor streaming in from the moonlight. I suddenly had the chills. The small hairs on my arm stood on end and I felt a sudden coldness in the air. Slowly I turned towards the window, and at the corner of my eye I can see it again, but this time the feet with the dress were rocking with the wing. I could hear the rope creaking under the weight. I opened my eyes, but not looking at it directly, and could see the feet slightly kicking. I began to whimper, whispering, "Go away, go away." I began to cry softly, knowing full well it was some kind of a ghost. The feet started kicking a bit more as I covered my ears to keep from hearing that rope crackling. A soft choking sound along with what sounded like bones snapping filled my bedroom, and finally that's when I cracked. I yelled, "Mom, Mommy," and in a few seconds she burst through the door and stood at the doorway. "Oh my God," and quickly she ebbed me from off the floor, and we both ran upstairs to the neighbors. She thought that maybe the little old woman hung herself out the window, but that wasn't the case. After banging at the upstairs neighbor's door for a few minutes, the little old woman answers the door as her husband stands behind her. My mother explained what they had seen, and they both came downstairs and into my bedroom, but when they all looked, nothing was there. The woman looked distraught with obvious signs of stress and had to leave. The old man just sighed and looked at my mom. "Sorry about that. That's Amelia. She does pop up here once in a while." We moved shortly after that once incident, but before we did, we got to find out who Amelia was. She was the sister of the upstairs neighbor. She hung herself from her window, which was right above my room, cause she found out her husband was cheating on her. Her sister later moved into her apartment in order to keep her things for a keepsake. Amelia always appears and had been chasing away previous tenants. It's been going on for years since then, and I'm sure it's still been happening. I'm an adult now, and sometimes I do pass by the old apartment and see the apartment still empty. Some years I'd see a light or two on, meaning someone had been living there at some point, but it never lasts. What really gets me, though, after all these years, after how long, and I wonder why does Amelia still hang around? Luna was excited to finally be able to go on a vacation that she and her husband Alex had been planning for months. They got paid time off and wouldn't be bothered the entire time they were gone. Alex loaded the car, making sure that they had everything they needed. Luna was sure she would forget something if it weren't for him. "Ready to go?" Alex asked, opening the car door for his wife, who nodded with a smile and sat in her seat. During the car ride, Luna enjoyed the scenery of the different colors of the autumn leaves which littered the branches. Sunbeams cut through the trees, making her squint her eyes even with sunglasses. It was such a beautiful day that she knew nothing could go wrong. Arriving at the hotel, she went inside to check them in while her husband unloaded their bags from the car. "Reservation under Hart, please," she told the front desk clerk. Alex brought in the bags, and an attendant pulled around a bell cart for them. "Ah yes, Hart, in the single-bed honeymoon suite," the clerk confirmed, typing on their keyboard, preparing the key cards, and handing them to her. Later that day they had dinner reservations at a restaurant, and Alex found the waiter overly friendly with his wife, which caused him to be a bit perturbed. "Honey, is something the matter?" Luna asked, concerned to see the expression on her husband's face change. "Everything's okay," Alex assured her with a smile, reaching out and gently holding her hand. She breathed a sigh of relief and returned his smile, intertwining their fingers. Even though he eased her mind, she couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something felt off. Of course, her husband had always been the mysterious type. When dinner was over, Luna waited in the car for Alex, who was paying their bill. Once done, he got into the car and drove them back to the hotel. "Was everything okay? It took you a while," Luna questioned. "Of course, the waiter just wanted to talk, is all. I was so wrapped up in our conversation that time got away from me. I'm sorry if you waited long," Alex replied. When they entered their hotel room, she confronted him and asked what had bothered him. "Honey." "Yes. Did the waiter's behavior bother you?" Alex became quiet as he slowly took off his jacket. "Not at all." "Are you sure?" He turned to her with a look in his eyes much different than the usual softness she was used to. Those beautiful eyes were now dark and full of an emotion she had never seen before on his features. "Don't worry, Luna. I took care of it." Luna trembled. "Honey, ... what did you do?" Alex walked up to her gently, touching her cheek and gazing into her eyes. "My sweet Luna, I would do anything to keep you safe, especially from someone flirting with you right before me," he told her, lovingly kissing her forehead. She lowered her head, spotting it. There, on the front of his shirt, was a small splatter of blood. It was crimson and most certainly didn't belong to either of them. In the background, the TV played the news, who were reporting about a dead body at the very restaurant they were just at. A cook had found the body in the meat locker. It was the waiter. According to the police, he had been hung up on a meat hook and wrapped in plastic wrap, then beaten to death with a meat mallet, leaving him almost unrecognizable. The cameras had been destroyed and no one had seen anyone or anything suspicious. There was no trace of prints on the mallet handle either. Whoever had done this was very good at covering their tracks, as if they had done this many times before. Luna knew, though, who had done this, just like all the other strange reported murders. It was her husband behind it, all driven by jealousy. On Easter Sunday morning, April 11th, 1971, I woke up early to an unusually quiet house. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs and a bathroom. There was my parents' bedroom, my older brother's bedroom, and my bedroom, which I shared with my younger brother and the newest member of our family. He was 5 months old, born in November 1970. His crib was next to my bedroom door, so it would be close to my parents' bedroom door that was just outside my door. I was really excited when I woke up that morning because the night before, my mom was talking about the Easter egg hunt and the candy we would get when we woke up. U.S. kids also helped decorate the Easter eggs we would hunt for. I remembered the year before how much fun and rewarding Easter was for us kids, so I couldn't wait for Mom to wake up and bring us downstairs for the candy. I walked up to the gate that was in the doorway and tried to listen for movement in my parents' bedroom, indicating that Mom was getting ready to get us kids. But it was still quiet, so I figured that I was up too early and decided that I should get back in bed and just wait for her. Before getting back in bed, I looked into my infant brother's crib and saw him laying on his side facing me with one eye opened and the other eye closed. A sight that I still see in my head and in my nightmares to this day. I got back in bed and almost got back to sleep when I heard Mom getting up in her room. I decided to keep my eyes closed and let Mom think she woke me up to give us our Easter baskets and start the egg hunt. When she came into my bedroom, instead of being awoken by an excited mother getting us riled for the festivities, I heard her screaming like I never heard before or after that. My infant brother had passed away in his crib the night before. Since I was too young to really understand what was happening, I was still thinking about the candy and egg hunt. Mom was absolutely hysterical, understandably, which made this morning the most traumatic event of my entire life. It was really difficult to see Mom in that condition. Because of the trauma of that morning, I blocked my mind from this memory for a very long time. Upon remembering it later in my life, I realized it was probably the cause of what was to come in that house. Several weeks later, I woke up to see that I was the last one to wake up that morning and was alone upstairs. Instead of yelling for Mom to come and get me, I felt compelled to go into my older brother's room. His room had a little attic door in the wall which happened to be open. That was a bit unusual. I'd never seen that door left open before. I started walking towards the door to close it and it just slammed shut by itself. It was loud and startled me, but wasn't scary to me since I'd seen doors move automatically before at the grocery store. I had no idea at that time it was something to be scared of. Mom had heard the door slamming from downstairs and came running upstairs to see if I was okay. I told her what happened, but she didn't believe me. She said doors don't open and close by themselves. I knew better, though. She couldn't convince me that I didn't see what I just saw. This event was the first of many strange occurrences that would happen to me in that house before we moved out. Now, I truly believe it was my brother talking to me the only way he could. Let me get this straight from the start. No, I do not believe that my family's house was haunted back then. However, one thing is for sure, no matter what the reason was, something sinister had targeted me during the summer of 2006. It all began during one of those nights when my 9-year-old self preferred playing with a game handheld with low volume instead of sleeping. At some point around 2 in the morning, my ordeal started out of the blue. I heard the door slowly open and quickly hid the console under my pillow, which literally muted the device as I faked being asleep. With care, I then opened one eye just enough, expecting to see my mother, the single parent of the house, checking on me to ensure I was asleep, but instead the door just remained partially open. I waited for at least 4 minutes, which felt like forever, thinking she already saw what she needed to while my eyes were closed, and hoping to see her close the door. When I was fed up with waiting, I decided to get out of bed and close the door silently. However, the moment I approached, the door was violently slammed shut. Later in the morning, by mere fear of snitching on myself, I avoided mentioning any of it to my mother, expecting she would then assume that I was awake the whole time. I went about my day, doing what kids do, and during the night I was back to business with the game handheld. Once again, around 2 in the morning, the door slowly opened. Well, Josh, you know the routine, I thought, confident and executing the usual choreography to deceive my mother. Once again, I opened one eye and the door was partially open with no other particular activity. Annoyed because I did not want to walk to the door like the night before, I called. Mommy faking a sleepy and tired voice to the best of my ability, but got no response the first time. Mom, I insisted more convincingly after a few seconds. The nonverbal response I obtained covered me with shivers. 4 fingers, white like snow, appeared as an unknown hand gripped the top of the door, the way a person would do to hold it open. They were almost glowing in the dark, almost fluorescent. Was it a glove? No, because I could glimpse the dark color of the nails contrasting with the fingers. They remained there, no movement, nobody taking a look or fully coming in the room. Mom, is that you? I asked hesitantly. How could it be her? I knew for a fact that my mom had a personal reason for never painting her nails, so they were never that dark. I called again, worried at this point, and in response a second set of 4 similar fingers appeared at the very bottom of the door, as the intruder unnaturally gripped the door with his other hand, I assumed. I began hyperventilating, mustering the strength to scream for my mother at this point. But when I tried, only a whimper came out of my mouth instead. In response, a third set of 4 similar fingers appeared in the middle of the door near the handle. "Mommy," I heard multiple people say at the same time. At least this is how I can describe what I heard. It was as if they miserably tried to imitate me, frightening me instead. I just screamed. The 3 hands quickly retreated behind the door, which was then violently slammed shut by the intruders. A few seconds later, my mother stormed inside the room. She just reassured me that it was nothing and opted for me to sleep besides her in the main bedroom. Nothing else happened that night, and having my mother with me meant no more furtive nocturnal gaming, but at least 100% safety. How wrong I was. About 2 days later, I was peacefully sleeping one night with my back glued to my mother's chest and belly when I was suddenly awakened by a strange noise. I opened my eyes and immediately looked at the door from where I was, without moving an inch, and witnessed a vision of horror. The fingers were there, the hands were back, but that time there were around 10 hands and thus countless fingers tapping on the door with the tips of their nails, the way some people casually do on a table when they wait for something. "Moom," I whispered, trying to notify her without alerting the intruders. "Moom, wake up," I insisted, discreetly tapping her thigh with my hand. Her response froze my whole being. "SSSSE, just ignore it, Josh. Sleep," she said before placing her arm over my body to reassure me. Instead, what I saw mortified me to the point that I could no longer make any sound. The arm that covered me was as white as snow, with dark nails at the end of each of its fingers. Paralyzed with terror, I remained still, trembling to the core and letting tears of fear just streaming from my eyes. I remained there the whole night, and to this day I do not know how I fell asleep, but I did. The next morning I woke up to my mom getting ready for work as if nothing strange happened. Was it really my mom? Was my own mother part of the intruders? I guess we will never know. We did not talk about it at the time and never did since. I requested to go back to my room the same day and opted for barricading my door every night. To this day, I still do so, no matter what building or room I spend the night into, and nobody understands why. I know that I have to. Why? Because every night I can still hear the faint tapping of multiple fingers on the door. Sometimes they even knock, but never say anything other than that distorted mommy for whatever reason. I just know that I should never come face to face with the sinister people behind the door. When I think back to my childhood, my memories are a mixture of the innocent and the eerie. Growing up in a small town where everyone knew each other, my friends and I spent our days exploring the woods and fields that surrounded our neighborhood. It was the summer of 15 years ago, the summer when we met Bernard. Michael, Zachary, and I were inseparable. Michael was the kind of kid who could make friends with anyone. He had a smile that could light up a room and a laugh that was contagious. Zachary was different. He was half friend, half bully, always teasing and testing us, but in his own way he was loyal. The 3 of us had our own little world, a realm of adventure and secrets that only we knew. One afternoon, while we were playing hide and seek in the woods behind Zachary's house, we stumbled upon a boy we had never seen before. He was sitting on a fallen tree, staring at the ground. He looked about our age, maybe a year or 2 older, with dark, tousled hair and piercing blue eyes. "Hey, who are you?" Michael called out, always the first to extend a hand. The boy looked up, his expression unreadable. "Bernard," he said softly. "I've never seen you around before," I said, stepping closer. "Do you go to our school?" Bernard shook his head. "Just moved here." "Cool," Michael said, grinning. "You want to play with us?" Bernard nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. We welcomed him into our group, and for the rest of the day we ran through the woods, playing games and climbing trees. Bernard was quiet, almost shy, but there was something about him that intrigued us. He moved with a strange grace, his eyes always watchful, as if he were constantly on guard. Zachary, true to form, tested Bernard's boundaries. He teased him, called him names, but Bernard never reacted the way Zachary expected. He would simply stare at Zachary, his expression calm and composed, until Zachary would eventually give up and move on. One day, Zachary brought his disposable camera, one of those old ones with the film you had to get developed. "Let's take a picture," he said, gathering us together. We huddled close, Bernard standing slightly apart, and Zachary snapped the picture. It captured a moment in time, the four of us smiling and carefree. That picture would later become a haunting reminder of the events that would unfold. As the summer wore on, Bernard's presence became a regular part of our days. He never spoke much about his family or where he lived, and whenever we asked, he would change the subject. But we didn't mind, we were just happy to have another friend. Then one day Bernard didn't show up. We waited at our usual spot in the woods, but he never came. The next day was the same, and the day after that. Weeks turned into months, and we never saw Bernard again. We assumed he had moved away as mysteriously as he had arrived. Life went on. The years passed, and our childhood adventures became distant memories. I joined the police force, driven by a desire to protect and serve. It was a job that required me to face the darkest aspects of humanity, but it also gave me a sense of purpose. One rainy afternoon, while cleaning out my attic, I stumbled upon a box of old photos. Among them was the picture Zachary had taken that summer. I stared at it, a flood of memories washing over me. There we were, Michael, Zachary, Bernard, and me, captured in a moment of innocent joy. A strange feeling settled in my gut. Bernard's face seemed to stare back at me, his eyes more intense than I remembered. I took the photo to work the next day, unable to shake the feeling that something was off. I showed it to a colleague who specialized in cold cases. "Hey, take a look at this," I said, handing him the photo. "Do you recognize this kid?" He examined it closely, his brow furrowing. "Give me a second." He walked over to his desk and began sifting through files. After a few minutes, he pulled out a faded document and compared it to the photo. "This is Bernard," he said, his voice hushed. "Bernard Thompson. He went missing almost 30 years ago. It's one of our oldest cold cases." A chill ran down my spine. How could Bernard have been missing for 30 years when we met him only 15 years ago? It didn't make sense. Driven by a hunch, I decided to investigate further. I returned to the woods where we used to play, the place where we had first met Bernard. The trees had grown thicker, the paths more overgrown, but it was still the same place. I walked deeper into the woods, my mind racing with possibilities. As I reached a small clearing, I noticed something half buried in the underbrush. It was a piece of fabric, tattered and weathered by time. I knelt down, my heart pounding, and began to dig. The earth was damp and heavy, but I kept at it, my hands trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. Then I saw it, a skeletal hand, fingers curled as if reaching for something. I unearthed the rest of the remains, my breath catching in my throat. There, in the shallow grave, lay the skeletal remains of a child, long forgotten and alone. I called for backup, my mind numb with shock. As we waited for the forensic team to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling that Bernard was still watching me, his piercing blue eyes following my every move. The investigation confirmed what I already knew. The remains belonged to Bernard Thompson, a boy who had gone missing nearly 30 years ago. But the mystery of how he had appeared to us 15 years ago remained unsolved. I often think back to that summer, to the strange, quiet boy who appeared out of nowhere and then vanished just as suddenly. Bernard's ghost, or whatever he had been, left an indelible mark on our lives. Michael and Zachary, when I told them what I had discovered, were as bewildered as I was. We may never know the full truth of what happened, but I can't help but feel that Bernard was trying to tell us something. Perhaps his restless spirit sought companionship, a way to reach out and be remembered. Or maybe there are things in this world that we simply cannot understand, forces beyond our comprehension that shape our destinies. Whatever the case, I know one thing for certain: some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, lingering in the shadows of our past, forever haunting our memories. I had a scary incident when I was in Nigeria for my uncle's wedding. In Nigeria, many people leave the city to celebrate the new year in their villages. In our village, the house we stayed in was still under construction. It was a cinder block building with a roof over our heads, but far from complete. During December, the weather in the village tends to be a bit chilly because of a season called Harmattan. Harmattan is a cool, dry wind that blows from the Sahara Desert across West Africa into the Gulf of Guinea during winter and spring. It brings cold air from Europe down to that part of West Africa. Now, back to the story. One day, my family members were on the side porch connected to my parents' room. The house, which is more of a mansion, has 7 bedrooms and 9 bathrooms. My parents' bedroom leads to a narrow hallway. I was looking for my phone because I had misplaced it somewhere. Before walking into my parents' room, I saw something odd at the bottom crack of the door. The doors in Nigeria are usually brown, and through the visible crack, I saw two black feet on the other side just playing around. In my mind, I thought, wait a minute. My dad has big feet, but he's in America. My brother was in the living room, and my mom was sweeping the garage. Something told me not to open the door, so I just watched. It felt like a good 30 minutes, though it was probably only about 3. The big black feet looked demonic as hell, like my dad's feet, but a bit inhuman. It terrified me to the core. I ran to my mom, telling her that I saw some feet walking around. She told my grandma, but my grandma accused me of lying and didn't believe me. She said, "Stop lying on me." I went off on her, feeling completely gaslighted, but at least my mom believed me. So a few nights later, my uncle is a hardcore Christian. He made a potion with palm oil and holy oil and some clove and ginger and cleansed the house. It's not ... Yet a few nights before the big demonic-ass unhumaniad feet earlier, I mentioned that my house is an incomplete building, so me and my 3 siblings all slept in my parents' bedroom. It's bigger than a self-contained apartment in the States. That how big it is. So left side of the room, there's a window facing cassava leaves, and a sucker, and another side a window was on the porch. Every as I can remember, I can hear someone shelving. Something like I heard it before, but it started to make sense, but it would get louder and louder and quiet, so I had to think fast and lock TFN. When you hear shoveling, what does it remind you of? That means ... death, someone being buried. Like for part 2, and I apologize for my incorrect English. It started with a ding on my phone, a notification from my OnlyFans announcing a new subscriber. That wasn't unusual. Most of my fans are sweet, sending tips with cheeky requests or shy compliments. This one just sent an old, worn-out teddy bear with no note. I'd have brushed it off if not for the bear's unsettling, stitched-up eyes that seemed to pierce right through its scruffy fur. I tossed it in a corner of my room and moved on. Days turned into weeks, and the gifts kept arriving, each more personal than the last. A necklace I lost at a club years ago, a postcard I sent my grandma from Paris, even a photo of my childhood dog, long passed away. How did this fan find these things? Then came the letters, each typed with no signature, just a chillingly familiar recounting of my past. Memories I never shared online, moments I thought were private, poured out on paper as if my own mind had betrayed me. I tried ignoring the packages, blocking the user, but nothing worked. They always found a way back, subscribing under a new name, their identity masked in the digital crowd of faceless admirers. The last straw was the video. It popped up in my message requests. A grainy clip showing a figure walking through what looked like my old high school. The camera panned up to reveal the face of the person filming, except there was no face. Just a blur where features should have been, but the voice, it whispered my name, chilling me to the bone. I called the police, but what could they do? The account was untraceable, the gifts sent from different locations around the world, no fingerprints, no leads. They told me to tighten my security, maybe take a break from streaming, but this was my livelihood. So I kept going, pretending everything was fine, smiling for the camera while my nights were haunted by the fear of who or what was watching me. Every shadow seemed to whisper, every creak of my house a sign that my faceless fan was near. Tonight I'm going live for the first time in weeks. I've triple-checked my locks, bought a new security system, even got a friend to sit off camera. But as I prep, my phone dings again. It's a message from a new subscriber, a video link and nothing else. My finger hovers over the button. I know I shouldn't click it, but fear and curiosity are a potent mix. The video loads, a live feed of my own room viewed from a corner. I whirl around to the spot, heart slamming against my ribs, but there's nothing there. Just the empty space and the teddy bear with the stitched eyes sitting where I threw it weeks ago, except now one eye is missing, and in its place, a tiny camera lens winks at me. My screen flickers, and a new message types itself out, one letter at a time: "See you soon." Finally, it was done. After a few weeks of hard work, I was finally able to finish fixing my old mountain bike. There were a lot of problems with it, but after days of hard labor and a few issues that came with fixing the different parts of my bike, it was finally ready. I longed for a bike ride down to the nice countryside, between the fields, the beaten paths, and the small woods that were outside the town. After a quick trial run where I just made sure everything was fine, I decided to go home so I could get some rest and I would leave tomorrow. The next day, I felt like a kid on Christmas morning. I was so excited to go, I wasn't as rested as I hoped to be. To be honest, I barely slept during the last few days because I just wanted to finish fixing the bike. I tend to be like that. I get so eager to work on a project that I focus solely on it. While I thought I would get some nice rest last night, the excitement got the better of me and I couldn't sleep properly. Ultimately, my exhaustion did not matter because my excitement was still strong, and that gave me the boost of energy I needed to conquer the day. I left around 11 a.m. having a general idea of what paths I would take, but I figured that I could try different paths if I saw an opportunity. The sun on my skin and the light breeze felt amazing. It was the middle of October, but the temperature was warmer than usual, making the day feel marvelous. Maybe it was not so much the weather, but simply the feeling of victory of finally being able to go on a long-awaited bike ride, on a bike that I fixed all by myself. After a few miles, I entered one of the woods. At this point, I was completely alone, with only the sounds of birds in the distance. Nature can sometimes feel astonishing, and today was no exception. The quietness, the breeze, the view, all of that simply made me feel more alive than ever. As I was going down the woods, I noticed a path on my left. It felt like I had never seen it before, even though I had ridden in this area several times already. The curiosity got the better of me and I started taking it. I saw a few signs along the path indicating that it was a trail for hikers that would lead to a small town a few miles away from here. A few minutes later, I saw another path, once again on the left side. I decided to be curious, and I took it as well. I quickly realized that this was not a trail. After a few yards, I entered a small clearing where I could see that some human activities happened. I stopped and put my bike down. Maybe I could find something interesting in here. A lot of trees were cut and several logs, but mainly branches, were on the floor. I noticed some old bags and canisters at different places, probably abandoned by the workers who came here. Maybe I could find something interesting here. My trip started to feel like a treasure hunt. I didn't want to steal anything, but based on the looks of everything, it seems that no one came here in a few years. Vegetation had overgrown some of the objects left behind by workers, and some canisters looked rusty. As I was going further down the clearing, I realized that it was more abandoned than I anticipated. It felt like the place was abandoned quickly, maybe even overnight. Some equipment looked expensive, such as an old generator or saws. Why would people leave this here? This seemed a bit too expensive to simply be forgotten. As I walked, I heard a snap under my feet. At first, I thought it was an old branch, but something about the sound just wasn't right. I looked down and saw that I stepped on the carcass of a small animal. It looked like a chicken. This made me uncomfortable. Why would there be a chicken carcass here? Did people eat a whole chicken and leave the bones here? This would be the most logical explanation I could think of, but it was likely to be a different animal. This didn't stop me from going further. After all, I wasn't a baby and it's just old bones. I mean, it's normal and should probably be expected, right? As I ventured deeper into the clearing, I started to notice stranger things. There were some strange markings on some trees. At first, it looked like a mark to distinguish which trees should be cut, but then I realized that some words were written. Apology. Never again. This started to freak me out, but I brushed it off as a prank by some high schoolers who probably came here to drink and smoke joints. I liked my explanation. After all, it was very rational. The only thing is, I didn't see any cigarette butts or empty bottles, which made me feel a bit nervous. Okay, maybe just a prank with no alcohol involved, I thought. But why bring paint spray to do it here when it is likely no one goes around these parts? Something shiny caught my attention and pulled me away from my thoughts. I turned my head in its direction and started walking there. Here it was, sitting on an old tree stump, a knife that looked brand new. Not only that, but it looked like the expensive kind. It was long, clearly sharpened, and had some golden inscription on it. Free. I laughed to myself, thinking it was a sign for me to take it. After all, it was free, right? I grabbed the handle and pulled the knife out of the tree. At this moment, I heard a loud noise coming from the entry of the clearing. It was followed by the noise of something running through the branches. I turned around quickly, and I tried to see if I could see something. As I did that, the noise abruptly stopped. I dropped the knife on the ground and took a few steps back. For some reason, I started to feel uncomfortable. This place was weird and started to creep me out. I decided to walk back to where my bike was and leave. I picked up my pace, feeling more and more uncomfortable. As I did so, it felt like I kept hearing rustling noises around me. Every time I turned my head towards the direction of the sound, it stopped. At this point, I was almost running. As I arrived at the entrance of the clearing, my heart started racing. I couldn't see my bike anywhere. I looked around frantically but couldn't see it. I knew I left it there right at the entrance, but it simply wasn't around anymore. As I started to panic, I heard more rustling noises coming from my right. I looked there expecting to see something or someone, but once again the noise stopped right as I looked in its direction. I decided to gather all my courage and walk towards it. There were a few trees, but after that was simply an empty field. I turned back, walked back to the entrance of the clearing and yelled, "Hey, that's not funny, give me my bike back, assholes." No answer. As I kept looking around frantically, I noticed a small white mass on the left side of the entrance. I walked toward it, wondering why I hadn't seen it earlier, in the hopes that it was my bike. I knew deep down inside me that it was unlikely, especially since my bike was mainly black, but I couldn't stop hopping. As I got close to it, I realized the horror that was in front of me. It was a small pile of bones, some of which looked bigger than the chicken carcass I found. The bones were big enough to belong to something bigger, like a deer, a cow, or a man. As I got even closer to it, trying to identify what animal they belonged to, I realized that they were piled up in a precise manner, as if someone put them there intentionally. This was too much for me. My heart was beating so fast and I started to feel really scared. What the hell was this place? Part of me started contemplating leaving the area and never coming back, but I simply couldn't stop looking for my bike. At this point, my levels of fear and nervousness were out of proportion. I never felt that way before. And that's when it happened. I heard laughter very close from behind me. Not just any laughter, but the clear sound of a child giggling. It was not an adult. It was not the potential high schoolers that I feared. It was a child. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to find out. As soon as I realized what happened, I bolted out of the clearing and ran back to the path I initially took. I didn't care about my bike. I was too freaked out. If it was a prank, it was an elaborate one because I never saw anyone in there. Have fun with the bike, assholes, I thought as I ran away. After a few hours, I arrived in front of my house after a mix of running and walking. I was exhausted, and after a bit of thinking, I figured that I should call some friends to go back there with me. I didn't care about the bike anymore, but I hoped to see the prankster behind this elaborate scheme. With other people with me, I would have a chance of understanding all of that better and be ready if something were to happen. As I looked up toward my house, I realized that someone was in the front yard. After the events of the day, it felt unsettling and I was tense. However, the tension immediately released as I realized it was Mark, one of my high school friends. "Hey dude," he started, "I came to see you 5 minutes ago, but you weren't here. I was about to leave when I saw you walk up the streets. Dude, I really wanted to say congrats. You did a terrific job here," he added. What I asked? "What are you talking about now?" "Man, you're not going to belie," I tried to say before getting interrupted by Mark. "The bike. It's amazing. You really did fix it. I'll be honest with you, I had little hopes, but you did it," he exclaimed. "I'm sorry, Mark, but what the fuck are you talking AB?" I stopped. Behind Mark was the bike. The same bike I had been working on for the last weeks. The exact bike I had just lost. It was right in front of me on the side of the wall where Mark was standing. "Anyway, you shouldn't just leave it like that in the open. If you go on a walk, someone could steal it from you. That'd be a shame after the efforts you put into it," Mark continued. I was speechless. I couldn't believe my eyes. What was going on? Was I exhausted to the point where reality didn't make any sense anymore? Did I just dream all of that? "Oh, by the way, what is up with the flyer? I found it on your doorstep," Mark added. "I don't get it. There's not much on it. Did someone just leave that here?" or what, he asked me while handing me a small poster. It was completely white, with just one word written on it. As I looked at it, my heart stopped for a second as I read the single word, "free." On a chilly autumn night, 5 girls gathered in Lily's basement for what was supposed to be a fun and innocent sleepover. The moonlight barely seeped through the narrow, dust-covered windows, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The girls Lily, Iman, Selma, Maya, and Zoe were all around 14, their voices filled with the excitement and nervous energy that accompanies sleepovers. Earlier in the evening, they had devoured pizza and watched a couple of scary movies, but now, as the clock neared midnight, the mood shifted. Lily, always the one to push boundaries, suggested something different, something thrilling. "Let's try a planchette," she said, her voice a mix of excitement and daring. Maya hesitated. "Isn't that like dangerous?" "Nah, it's just for fun," Lily insisted. "Besides, it's probably all fake anyway." The others agreed, though with varying levels of enthusiasm. Selma, the most superstitious of the group, looked uneasy but didn't want to be the only one to back out. Zoe, ever the skeptic, rolled her eyes but joined in, her skepticism masking the tiny sliver of fear creeping up her spine. Lily rummaged through a drawer and pulled out an old wooden board and a small heart-shaped planchette. The letters and numbers on the board were faded, and the surface was worn with age. "Where did you get that?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. "My grandma gave it to me. Said it's been in the family for generations," Lily replied nonchalantly, though there was a hint of mischief in her eyes. They all sat in a circle, the board placed in the middle. The air felt heavier, the shadows darker, as if the basement itself was holding its breath. "Everyone place your fingers on the planchette," Lily instructed. The girls complied, their fingertips barely touching the wood. The room grew still, and the only sound was the soft rustling of their breathing. "Spirits of the board," Lily began in a mocking tone, "we ask you to speak with us. Are you there?" For a moment, nothing happened. The girls exchanged nervous glances. Then, slowly, the planchette began to move. "It's probably just one of us," Zoe said, but her voice wavered slightly. "Shh, let's see what it says," Lily whispered. The planchette slid across the board, stopping at YES. A chill ran down Selma's spine. "Who are you?" Maya asked hesitantly. The planchette began to move again, this time spelling out SARAH. "Do you need help?" Iman asked, her voice quivering. Again the planchette moved to YES. Suddenly the temperature in the room dropped and the lights flickered. The girls gasped, their hands trembling. "This isn't funny," Lily Selma exclaimed, her voice cracking with fear. "It's not me," Lily shot back, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. The planchette began to move faster, almost frantically, spelling out TRAPPED. "Who trapped you?" Zoe asked, now genuinely scared. The planchette moved erratically, almost violently, spelling out HIM. "Who is him?" Lily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Without warning, the basement door slammed shut, and a low, guttural growl echoed through the room. The girls screamed, pulling their hands away from the board, but the planchette continued to move on its own. "Get away from it," Maya cried, scrambling back from the board. The planchette spelled out one final message, TOOLATE. Suddenly, the basement was plunged into darkness. The girls clung to each other, their breaths ragged with terror. A heavy, oppressive presence filled the room, making it hard to breathe. Lily reached for her phone, desperately trying to use the flashlight, but the screen flickered and died in her hand. The others' phones followed suit, leaving them in complete darkness. "Lily, what's happening?" Selma whimpered, her voice barely audible. Before Lily could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from the shadows. Slow, deliberate, getting closer with each passing second. The girls froze, their blood running cold. A figure emerged from the darkness, its form barely distinguishable, like a black shadow darker than the night itself. It was tall, with elongated limbs and eyes that glowed faintly red in the pitch-black room. The air around it seemed to ripple with malevolence. I'm sorry," Lily stammered, her voice trembling. "We didn't mean to." The figure moved closer, its presence filling the room with a sense of dread so intense it was suffocating. The girls could barely breathe, could barely think. All they could do was stare in horror as it loomed over them. "Run!" Zoe screamed, breaking the paralysis that gripped them. They scrambled to their feet, knocking over the board in their haste. The door flew open and they bolted up the stairs, hearts pounding in their chests. But the darkness followed, an inky blackness that seemed to swallow everything in its path. As they reached the top of the stairs, the lights flickered back on. The basement was silent, the oppressive presence gone. But the girls didn't stop running until they were out of the house, panting and shaking. Outside, the cool night air did little to calm their frayed nerves. They huddled together on the front lawn, too terrified to go back inside. "What was that?" a man asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Lily whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But we need to get out of here. Now." They didn't argue. Grabbing their things, they ran down the street to Maya's house, never once looking back. As they huddled together in Maya's living room, too scared to sleep, they made a silent pact. They would never speak of what happened that night, never touch a planchette again. But the darkness they had summoned didn't fade with the night. It lingered in their minds, a shadow that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. And in Lily's basement, the planchette slowly moved across the board on its own, spelling out one last word. WATCHING. For as long as I can remember, it has been my mom and I. Well, my mom, me, and her. I gave her the official name, the Night Stalker, long ago. Even after all these years, I still don't know why she appears, what she wants, or what she even is. Her overall appearance is humanoid, minus genitals or nipples. She has the appearance of breasts, hence why I deemed her a woman, but no other overtly feminine or masculine traits. The few strands of hair that adorn her head are wispy and scraggly. They fall over an abnormally large forehead that tapers into a sharp chin. Her sickeningly wide mouth stretches from ear to ear. Or at least it would if she had any. The best way to describe my Night Stalker is if that Momo thing had an alien head and way less hair. She is tall. Not the kind of tall that elicits questions about your athletic abilities, but the kind that draws unwelcome stares and finger-pointing. She crouches just low enough to stare at me through my doorway. This has been happening since I was about 5 or 6 years old. In the beginning, I was terrified. I still am, but after nearly a decade of this happening nightly, you learn to deal with it, especially when no one believes you. My Night Stalker has been the reason behind many visits to several therapists and psychiatrists. After a brief stay in a mental facility at age 12, I realized that no one was going to help me. I played the role like I was better. My only option seemed to be to deal with my Night Stalker on my own or continue to be drugged from doctor to doctor and facility after facility. So I chose the former. I've tried everything over the years, from saging the house to taking up traditional religion, even to witchcraft, but still she remains watching me every single night. Some will read this and question why I didn't just shut my door at night. I tried that possible solution and spent the entire night hiding under the covers as my Night Stalker wailed, scratch-pawed at my door. The next morning I asked Mom if she heard any noises throughout the night, was met with a familiar look of worry. I quickly dropped the subject as the answer was apparent. I even thought that maybe our house was haunted, but after my first and last sleepover at 9, I was proven very wrong. A girl named Anna invited me to her birthday sleepover. It was a fun, joyous time filled with cake, ice cream, and giggles. As night approached, I felt confident that I had left my Night Stalker at home and could enjoy a peaceful night's sleep for once. I was quickly proved wrong as the shadowy image of her lanky form watched me silently from the corner of Anna's living room. Needless to say, that was my first and last sleepover, as I frantically awoke Anna's parents to contact my mother to pick me up at 1 a.m. I explained it away as being homesick, but I think she knew better. About 2 years ago, acceptance finally crept in, as this entity seemed bound to haunt my nights forevermore. That was until recently. About 2 weeks ago, I saw her in daylight. While daydreaming in science class, I looked out the window, and there she was in all her horrifying glory, standing nearly as tall as the tree in the campus courtyard. In the light of day, I could see every wrinkle that marred her pale white skin that rested over a frail skeleton that stood its entire unnatural length. She just stood there with her gauntly long arms resting at her sides. If it were not for the menacing smile that crept across her face, I could have assumed she was some early Halloween decoration. Upon seeing such a ghoulish sight, most would scream bloody murder. And even now, as I write this letter, I'm still unsure if it was shock, the acceptance of an inevitable fate, or both that prevented any sound from escaping my lips. I recall looking around the room to see if anyone else had noticed. Most were paying attention to the lecture, and the handful that were also daydreaming out the window showed no signs that they were also seeing the gruesome apparition. Ever since then, I have continued to see her in both daytime and at night. She maintains a healthy distance in the light, but has begun to inch closer every night. For years, she has stood several feet outside my doorway during her regular nighttime visits. I know she hasn't moved in all these years because her position has always been right across from the large painting in our hallway that my mom bought when I was around 7. In the 2 weeks since my Night Stalker's first appearance in the daytime, she has migrated past the wall painting and made it to my door. Which brings me to the ultimate purpose of this letter. 2 nights ago, I awoke to see her standing just inside the threshold of my door. And last night, she stood just feet from my bed. I don't know for sure what will happen when she reaches me, but I have an idea, and it terrifies me beyond belief. I've tried to delay going to sleep as long as I could, but even now, as the night continues to grow darker, I feel frigid breath on my neck. To those who didn't believe me, who called me imaginative, crazy, or just a straight-up liar, I forgive you. Somewhere along the way, I found forgiveness. And though I still fear my fate, I hope there is peace in the next plane of existence. This letter was found at the scene of the horrendous murder of 16-year-old Hannah Stevens. Stevens was found mutilated beyond recognition in her home. Reports say her mother was unaware of the gruesome scene mere feet away from her, as she heard nothing. It wasn't until she went to wake Hannah for school that she discovered the devastating scene. It was also reported that, though there were no other residents currently living in the Stevens home, DNA testing was necessary to positively identify the remains. There were no signs of a break-in or intruder, sources say. At the time, police aren't releasing any new information, but ask that if anyone has any info to please contact the Granite Falls Police Department at 555-557-0000000. I found the girl's bones in the church attic, tangled in a spider's web. She hung suspended from threads of gold and silver gossamer, her skeleton illuminated by the rays of the setting sun. I yanked her skull free, marveling at its contours as many-legged bugs danced in the sockets. I longed to brush them aside with my tongue. But instead I wept, cradling what remained of her head as though it were a child. I wept out of anger, jealousy, and most of all, relief. Relief because despite the goddess's love, despite the careful way she tore apart the girl's body, ripped out her spine and cracked open her ribs, splaying them like the wings of an angel who had tried to fly, she had ultimately been discarded. The goddess hadn't chosen her, she had marked her with failure. I wept because I knew I wouldn't fail. A bracelet lay on the floor among shards of bone, spider carcasses, and rat droppings. Allegra, it read in elegant script. I knew her. I had known her. She was the 5th child to go missing this year, and no one held out hope that she'd be found alive. They spoke of her in hushed, reverent tones. She had become a figure of the past, to be feared, worshipped, and remembered. I wanted to be spoken of like that. So as the village searched for her, I did too. Call it fate, but I sought her out in the old church, where even the bravest hesitated to step. They said it was haunted, but it wasn't. It was infested. Spiderwebs clung to every surface, and the goddess waited in the shadows. I could feel her watching me now. My body wouldn't stop trembling. Everyone knew of the church and the deity that didn't breed successors but made them. The goddess would grant any wish if you were willing. And I was. I stroked Allegra's bones, marveling at them. "I'm so jealous of you," I whispered. "But I know I'm better." My chest tightened when I heard breathing behind me. My heart pounded, and bile rose in my throat. The goddess's breath came in harsh, rattling gasps. She smelled of blood and decay. She reached over my shoulder, entwining a long, furry appendage around my neck. I tried to turn and see her, but she held me in place, immobilizing me. "Not yet," she murmured. "What is there to rush when we possess infinite time? You are what I have sought from the beginning, are you not? You seek what I can give. But tell me, what is it you desire in exchange for your sweet flesh?" Her words sent shivers down my spine. They stripped me of thoughts, leaving me only able to point with a trembling finger. I pointed to Allegra, stripped to the bone, left to hang in a web she had not wanted and did not deserve. I did it belong to me. I want to fly, I whispered. The pressure around my neck tightened a warning. Speak boldly or not at all. I want to fly, I repeated more firmly. I want to touch the heavens and look down, laughing at those left behind to rot. They will see they are what they branded me as, nothing, loathsome, and they will love me for it. I have always adored humanity, the goddess said, amused. You are a fascinating, selfish species. Fun, I enjoy playing with you and making you scream. Allegra was so much fun. But you, my dear, the goddess removed her noose from my throat and wrapped it around my waist. She held me lovingly and crooned into my ear, you, my dear, my sweet, loving beast, are what I have been waiting for. You are meant to fly. I don't know the words to describe death, don't ask me to try, as it would be a disservice. I implore you to find out for yourself. But I can tell you how good it feels to be held by the universe, to have years of wishing and wanting come alive. Looking into the goddess's eyes, I saw the happiness I had been denied since birth. She held me to her breast as she stripped away the confines of humanity. You can't fly when you're so heavy, she smiled at me, her teeth smeared with blood. I'll hold these for you. I thank her because the flight would not have been possible without her. Unlike Allegra, I can fly. I am not shards of bone or tangles of hair caught in a monster's web. I am of my own making. I have gone farther than anyone else. It is my name, whispered and adored. I see them search for me, praying and sinking onto tired knees. They look toward the old church, but do not dare approach. Come, I wish to tell them, find me. Climb the stairs and see the deity's creation. Bow before your new god, test my name on your lips. Trace the outline of my jagged wings and call me by what I have become, not what I once was. For I am a legend, and be sure you never forget. When Erica first suggested hiring a clown for Chris's 5th birthday party, my heart nearly stopped. She was so excited, her eyes sparkling with the joy of planning our son's big day, that I couldn't bring myself to say no. The memories I had buried for nearly 2 decades began to stir, their edges sharp and jagged. I nodded, forcing a smile while my mind spiraled back to that horrible day. 20 years ago, my younger brother Mark was just turning 6. My parents had wanted his birthday to be special, just like we did for Chris now. They hired a clown to entertain the kids, a man who called himself Mr. Giggles. I remember the way his red nose bobbed when he laughed, how his painted smile seemed too wide, too stretched. At first, everything was fine. Kids were laughing, parents were chatting, but then, in the middle of a balloon animal trick, everything changed. The man masquerading as a clown wasn't who he pretended to be. Mr. Giggles was a serial killer, someone who used children's laughter as a cover for his sick games. I didn't see the knife until it was too late. One moment Mark was laughing, and the next he was lying on the ground in a pool of blood, his little eyes wide with terror. I tried to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. I was frozen, unable to move, as the man turned on Mark's friends, then my parents. He moved with a methodical precision, his painted smile never wavering. Somehow, in the chaos, I found my legs. I ran, stumbling through the house, searching for a place to hide. I found the basement door and threw myself inside, slamming it shut and locking it just as the man's footsteps approached. He banged on the door, calling my name in a sing-song voice. Jerry, Jerry, come out and play. I curled up in the corner, my hands over my ears, rocking back and forth, praying he wouldn't get in. Eventually, the banging stopped. When the police arrived, they found me there, huddled and shaking. Everyone else was dead. The years that followed were a blur of therapy and nightmares. I never told anyone the full story, not even Erica. The shame and fear twisted together until they became something I couldn't untangle, something I pushed deep down where I thought it could never reach me. But now, as I stood in our living room watching the clown we had hired for Chris's party, those memories crashed back into me like a wave. He called himself Bingo, and he seemed harmless enough, making the kids laugh with his silly jokes and magic tricks. But every time he looked at me, I felt the cold grip of terror in my chest. The party went off without a hitch. The kids had a blast, Chris was all smiles, and Erica was thrilled with how everything turned out. I tried to relax, tried to remind myself that this was just a regular guy in makeup, not the monster from my past. But the unease never left me. As the last guest left and the house quieted down, I walked over to Bingo to settle the payment. He was standing by the door, his painted smile still in place, but there was something different in his eyes. Something familiar. "Thanks for today," I said, reaching for my wallet. "You were great." He didn't move to take the money. Instead, he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low, taunting whisper. "You thought I forgot about you, Jerry." My blood ran cold. No one had called me that in years, not since that day. My heart pounded in my chest as I slowly raised my eyes to meet his. The grin on his face was no longer playful, it was malicious, cruel. Before I could react, he pulled out a dagger from beneath his oversized coat, the blade catching the light. The room seemed to spin as I staggered back, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The clown took a step forward, his voice dripping with menace. "It's time to finish what I started." My back hit the wall, nowhere left to run. The terror I had buried for 20 years was back, fully awakened, and this time there was no basement to hide in, no escape from the nightmare that had returned to claim me. And then, the world went dark. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, 3 disturbing rings. Unsettling pauses in between each one, about 5 seconds each. This was the first time all of this creepy shit happened, and at the time was what I had prayed would be the one and only time. But of course, I was wrong. Living alone by myself at the age of 18 has always been creepy yet very nice at the same time. The pleasure of not having to worry so much in life and having the freedom to do whatever you really want at home has always been an ultimate bliss to me. On the other hand, it can get a bit freaky at nighttime, especially at nighttime. But me being a man, I had grown past that little fear, until the knocking began. The weird thing, however, was that I live in the middle of nowhere. Legitimately the middle of nowhere. The epitome of being in literally nowhere. So for someone to be ringing my doorbell at the middle of the night is very rare and has never happened before, so it gave me the chills when it first happened. Obviously, my first instinct was to look out the window that is on the top of the door to see who it is, and I did that. But no one was there. Weirded out, I just dismissed it as a punk teenager or a group of teenagers doing the good old classic ding-dong ditch prank. I also did this when I was younger, so I understood the joke and left it as it was. I wasn't in any danger or anything, just some kids pulling harmless jokes to try and scare someone for their YouTube channel to get views on. And that was it for the rest of the night, and I went to bed without hearing any more. But when this happened, I was very weirded out and had a strange feeling in my stomach. Knowing it was probably just the ding-dong ditch stunt, I still had this unexplained sensation in my stomach. A feeling in which I felt fear but also anger, a feeling like I was going to throw up. Like 1,000,000 maggots had been eating away at my guts type of sensation. What if it wasn't just a joke? What if it was something else, something unknown? Something completely sinister. The next morning it was the same old getting up, eating breakfast, and scrolling on my phone texting with my old friends, completely forgetting about what happened the night before until it just hit me all of a sudden in my memory. I was thinking about it all day, even after breakfast that morning. When I would take a shower, when I cleaned the house, when I was driving around town, even when I was on the toilet. It was just lingering in my mind somehow, even though I knew it was nothing to worry about. I can't even tell you how many times I tried to get rid of the thought of it, but every time I did, it enhanced and worsened somehow. What the hell, Jern, it was just some silly kids pranking you last night. Nothing more than that. You are a grown man being scared of some punks, I said to myself in my head. Get over it and just go and take a walk for a little bit to clear your mind. Listening to myself, I follow my own commands and take a quick walk around where I live, complete solitude, peace, and nature, as well as the feeling of someone watching me, or better, something watching me. When this weird sensation and feeling that we all have kicked in, I told myself, nah, fuck that shit. Hell no, and I started to speed walk back to my house. When I was doing this, however, the thought of the night before was very vivid and kicked in my head randomly. The noise of the doorbell going ding-dong and the feeling of that feeling in my stomach in which maggots were eating away at my insides grew back and came back to my harmless, innocent soul. Quickly rushing into the door of my house, I slam it shut and deadlocked the fuck out of that shit. This was a rare moment in which I have been very scared to the point in locking everything in my house up. The last time I did this was when I was sure I was being followed by this crazy homeless man that came out from the trees nearby. But it turned out that the poor man just wanted money and was just trying to get money from me. Feeling bad about this interaction, but also listening to my guts, I went back out and gave the man $5. He said, "Bless your soul," and smiled as he turned around and walked away. Knowing that he was just asking for money and wasn't trying to do anything harmful to me was when he walked past my house down the desolate street, looking for someone else to bargain from. Feeling silly about that whole thing really made me change a lot, and that moment was 2 years ago. I moved out from living with my mom when I was 16 because of some family issues. I sometimes miss that warm home, but also at the same time don't. A feeling that is hard to explain, really. Anyways, the second time I heard the knocking was during the night again after the night the first knocking was heard. I had just gotten ready to go to bed after pulling an all-nighter playing video games. It was 2 a.m., so very late at night, or technically the morning for all those dorks out there that want to correct me. Don't take it seriously or be offended. I'm just kidding, and I love you. Getting my bed set up and turning off my light, I hear a faint pounding noise. Thud. 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 The last one was extremely loud and startled me, I gotta admit. 5 knocks, the first 4 starting off quiet, then progressively turning loud. I noticed that this time instantly, though, that it wasn't any ringing from the doorbell, it was just plain old knocking. I just waited in my bed silently, acting like a coward with the blanket covering my face, hiding underneath it. In genuine fear, I heard my heart pounding and could feel it. Thud, 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 this time the knocking, but very, very loud. Extremely loud. Again. Thud, thud, thud. Then thud, thud. Thud. And then complete silence. What the actual fucking shit was that I said to myself, screaming in my own head. And then I went to bed without even knowing it, drifting off. Then I woke up suddenly. Looking at my phone's time, it showed 2:35 a.m. I had only been asleep for 20 minutes. Come on, what fucking now, I said in annoyance and rage. Ding dong, ding dong. Thud, thud, thud. He 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 ha hey 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 ha. Buzz 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 buzz. Ha 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 ha. I'm going to fucking kill you, Jaren. Ha 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 ha. You little shit. Ha ha ha. Hate to get murdered. He hey ding dong dong ding dong ding dong ding in 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 in. I suddenly woke up again sweating. It was only a horrible nightmare. Getting out of my bed to get a glass or water to calm myself down from the nightmare, I walk out my room and head downstairs to the kitchen. But then, ding dong g g g g yong gong ju. The last note was long and echoey sounding, and it looped around in my head for a long time till it faded away into fucking nothingness. I am going fucking crazy, aren't I whispered to myself. Oh, see you are, aren't we all? A voice muttered down the hall. It was coming behind the door. Gently stepping over to the voice to avoid creaking from the wooden floor panels, even though whoever was outside heard me, I make my way over to it after grabbing a knife from the kitchen I was in before. I creep my head up to the window of the door and I first see nothing. Then, delay. A white thing in the corner of my eye, in my peripheral's vision. Focusing more on it since it is dark, I flip on the outdoor light and notice that it is a piece of a paper, and it has writing on it. It is a note. I open the door and swiftly grab it, running into the house faster than the speed of light it felt like, and close the door, locking it instantly. The one who knocks at night shall never be let in, the note read. The one who knocks at night shall never be let in again, same sentence. The one who knocks at night shall never be let in. The one who knocks at night shall never be let in, over and over again on every single space on the paper, even on the fucking back. What the fuck? Then, main thump, 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 thump. 3, 2, 1. It was in order, like it was counting down something. Taking this as some sort of a message, I peek over the door to the window and I see a black figure in the distance, a shadow of a human. It looked like a male, about 6 feet tall. It got closer and I made out a face that looked very familiar. My own face. They were wearing a mask, maybe of my face? How did they get that and make it? Have they been stalking me? Who are they? All these questions flowing through my puny little mind that had no answer. Leave, please, or I will call the cops, and I have a knife, I yell out from inside my house. No response, just the same knocking again and again. This time very, very, very close to my door, I could make out more of the face, and it was no mask that he was wearing. It was me. It was fucking me. Thump. 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 This time the knocks being softer, especially the last one, being barely audible, even by being so close to the fucking door. I took these knocks as another some sort of message and looked at the note again and noticed something. A doodle of an arrow pointing to the top of the page signaling that I need to look up. On the roof read, "Yes, if it reminds you of someone you know but have never known at the same time, especially don't let them in, since they shall not be let in, the one who knocks at night."